Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofoutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Starz TV series and everything in between. This is episode 79, The Scottish Prisoner, week 11. Well, hello there. Welcome back. I'm terribly happy to be with you. And since our last podcast, there has been a teaser trailer released by Starz. It's about 39 seconds long, and it shows a bit about season 3. Very exciting. It's all over the internet. It's on the Dram of Outlander pages. So go watch it if you haven't yet. Let's jump right in. Chapter 21. A poultice for bruising. A poultice is a soft, moist, massive material, typically of plant material or flour, applied to the body to relieve soreness and inflammation, and it's kept in place with a cloth. So it's a really obvious chapter title this time around. While Jamie's at Siverly's, John is waiting in the pub. He's drinking good beer and playing darts. Quinn was again off doing his own business. Tom and a server from the public room both disappeared. Presumably, they were together. And John was okay with this, except he wished he had someone to worry with. And he does worry as the afternoon wears on. He decides to go outside to get some fresh air. His head is swirling with thoughts over all the things that could be happening to Jamie. He's standing muttering to himself, and grabbing his shin where a rock he kicked came back upon it. Tom calls for him. He follows Tom through weeds and brambles. He shows John where Jamie is hiding behind the pub. Jamie is bloody and obviously injured. He asks Jamie why he's sitting in the hedge. Of course, that's the first question. Why are you sitting in a hedge? Jamie knows he can't go into the pub looking like this, and if he does, everyone will talk about it, and it will get to Siverly quickly where he's at, and that he and John are attached to each other. Jamie is always thinking strategically and practically. John inquires as to how hurt Jamie is. He says he's only bruised. King of the understatement, methinks. Tom points out the blood on his face and gasps when he sees it on his waistcoat. Jamie is sure he only needs a wet cloth to clean himself up. Gray himself didn't think it would only be a wet cloth that would make things better. He asks Jamie if it's an accident. No. He helps Jamie to his feet, seeing he's having difficulty himself. Jamie gives the nutshell version of what happened, and John thanks him. Tom comes back with water, a cloth, and an anxious young woman. She is absolutely mortified by how Jamie looks and thinks he was thrown from a horse. The aged mare he borrowed from her, Jamie was affronted that he could have been thrown off the old horse but refrained from saying so. Tom and John assisted Jamie up to the room. He couldn't get his left knee high enough to climb the stairs by himself. When they get into the room and he is placed on the bed, Tom is very concerned about Jamie's back because he rolls over onto his side. And then he tells him, "It's my arse." John stands back while Tom got Jamie's breeks off. He averted his gaze in an unobvious manner. He wants to play to Jamie's sensibilities, you know. But Tom's shocked exclamation causes John to look. And Jesus Christ, what the devil did he do to you? Almost the entirety of Jamie's left cheek was purplish blue, with a nearly black contusion surrounding it. A serious bruising. I told you. He tried to cave my head in with the sort of a club with the knob on one end. He's got the devil of a bad aim. Oh, John. He and Jamie really are matched when it comes to their wit and humor and smarts. Tom decides Jamie needs a poultice, hence the name of the chapter, to bring down the bruising and reduce pain. The landlord's wife comes back with him, and she has a charred onion poultice in hand. So I decided to look this up and to see if an onion poultice would indeed be the right one. Well, not really. It's good for treatment of inflammation and swelling, chest congestion, and a few other things. However, it will not help bruising by itself. So, what will help bruising specifically if you want to put a poultice on it? One of corn flour, grated raw potato, shredded raw turnip, raw grated cabbage leaves are all useful. There are also several other topical treatments to reduce inflammation and appearance of bruising. Pine compress, marshmallow root, arnica, alfalfa, golden seal, and witch hazel, to name a few. I will post the link in the blog write-up so you can click on it and read all about herbal remedies and poultices for bruising. The poultice was applied to Jamie's injured shoulder by the landlord's wife, but the application to his behind was going to be left to Tom. Jamie had to lie on his belly, shoulder supported by a pillow. The onions were so strong and eye-watering to everyone in the room. Gray stood by the window and kept a lookout in case Siverly decided to come looking for Jamie. The road remained empty. The landlord's wife left and came back with another poultice and whiskey. The first poultice had become askew with his movement. She pulled back his shirt to replace it, and she saw the old white scars. She gave Gray a hard, straight look. Then with great gentleness but a tight mouth, she straightened the shirt, unplaited Jamie's hair and combed it, then braided it loosely and bound it with a bit of string. Gray was conscious of a sudden lurch within, watching sparks of copper glint from the thick, dark red strands that slid through the woman's fingers. A sharp spurt of what began as simple jealousy ended as a sense of baffled longing as he saw Fraser, eyes closed, relax and turn his cheek into the pillow, his body yielding, unthinking, compliant to the woman's touch. It's interesting that John is jealous, and it's also interesting the word spurt was used. I'm sure it was completely intentional. But the fact that he is disquieted by Jamie's response to this woman's touch, he's had a mother, sister, wife take care of him. It's soothing and familiar, her ministrations upon him. And to be lovingly and kindly touched by a female is a rare treat for him. Heck, to be kindly touched in such a way by anyone medicinally caring for him or in any other way is rare. At this point, Tom and the landlord's wife leave the room. John offers Jamie brandy and asks him exactly what happened. He assumes Siverly recognized the poem. He did, and Jamie points out the "who are you" as a means of identification to others who know about it too, but don't know each other in person. Jamie does think Siverly recognized him, and it's likely a conspiracy. John asks what sort of conspiracy Jamie, or rather Mr. Fraser, thinks it is. So, why did John go back to the formal? Jamie expresses he thinks it's the Jacobites. It's obviously political. Then the topic of the unmentioned White Rose comes up. Jamie agrees he and Lally both left it out of their translations, and Jamie looks at Gray and drinks more brandy. Jamie says, now it's real. You wouldn't have ken, but in the time before the Rising in Scotland, and to little extent after, there were dozens, nay hundreds, of tiny conspiracies, plots, suggestions of plots, hints of plots. Any man who could hold a pen writing coded letters, talking of money, praising his own connections and blackening the names of others, and nearly all of it, nothing but wind. And then he sneezes and wipes his nose and thinks he may never eat onions again. And John asks him if it helps with the pain. Jamie has to stop and think about it, and it might. Or it could be the brandy. He goes on to explain how he met Minnie in Paris because she was working for her father, and as Hal had told John, he was a document dealer. It's pretty funny, Jamie's response. That's a very tactful way to put it. I'm surprised that she didn't tell you about the white rose herself. She must have seen it. Oh, of course she did. I should have kent that. Yes, John thinks Jamie should have known. Minnie would have told her. Minnie would have told him. Jamie thinks it's real because of Siverly's involvement, because of the money Siverly has obtained. And John agrees that Siverly does have a fortune unless he spent it on various things already, say like whores or his house. Jamie goes on to further say Siverly has something to lose. And he did try in all earnest to kill Jamie and will likely try again. So because of this, time is of the essence. John plans on seeing Siverly in the morning. But John is not satisfied with Jamie's answer on what now it's real means. Now it's real. And I understand that, but should not the possibility of a substantial conspiracy, well-funded and decently managed, increase your loyalty to the Stuart cause? Jamie's head was in his arms, and he turned his face to look at Gray, and he studied him for a moment. His eyes were narrowed. So John is playing the loyalty angle. I guess that's realistic, since Jamie is a convicted traitor for fighting in the uprising, hence hiding for 7 years in a cave on his property, then going to Ardsmuir prison, and then going to Hellwater as a parolee. Jamie tells him he'll never fight in that cause again, not from cowardice, but because he knows without a doubt the outcome will not be different than before. He will do the cause no service to allow it to go further. Gray drinks the last of the brandy from the flask. He thinks Jamie is telling the truth. He weighs out the evidence. Who was the poem a signal to? Was it enough to say there's a Jacobite conspiracy? Minnie and Jamie both thought so, and Siverly did try to kill Jamie over its knowledge. He mulls over his own impending meeting with Siverly. He reaffirms to himself he does owe Siverly a debt of honor for saving his life in Canada. But if Siverly did half of what Carruthers accused him of, his right would be forfeit to it. He thought about what he would wear. Not his uniform, it wasn't time for that yet. And his mind wandered. The scent of onions, now pleasant, it made him think of supper. It was late, though. Should he go down and get something for Jamie? And then he thinks on the woman touching Jamie and how he responded. And then he thinks if he had ventured to touch the man. Well, in truth, he had tried to touch him, if not directly, and he could see the glimmer of old scars where the shirt had opened. Jamie, probably feeling the intensity of John's eyes, opened his own and looked directly at him. John says, "I'm sorry." "Ego te absolvo," Jamie murmurs. And that's the end of the first chapter this week. John is always a soldier, isn't he? And as much as he wants to trust Jamie, there's a lot at stake here. And Jamie is a paroled Jacobite for all intents and purposes. It doesn't matter if he really wanted to fight in it or not. He did. So there's a lot going on in the undertones here, I think, in their relationship and what he believes it is, where Jamie's comfort level is, and in Jamie finally telling him he wasn't withholding information purposely before because he was interested in the cause. He didn't want to be alarming, I think. He's very practical, and he wanted to see how it would play out first before he tipped that hand. Interesting that he didn't think on his own that Minnie would tell John. Chapter 22, Glastwig. That is Siverly's manor house. John decides to walk to Siverly's estate in lieu of taking a horse. The bay gelding was lame and couldn't be ridden, and the old mare, well, she was recognizable because Jamie had ridden her. And as he walked, he recited Latin poetry in his head to keep his mind at ease. He knows he planned the best he could, he strategized, and his tactics were complete. And just like a battle, nothing could be done until you arrive on scene. And then you look at the variables at hand. He'd eaten a good breakfast, he was properly attired, and had several documents with him in his pockets. He thinks, now he goes along the dark road, thither whence they say, no man returns. It's from a Gaius Valerius Catullus poem. It's about a sparrow. Was John feeling like a proverbial canary in a coal mine right now? It's quite possible. And I don't think those words would be very settling whatsoever. It's a very old poem. He passes some happy pigs along the way, and he saw no one else until he came upon a woman and a boy, and they looked at him curiously. He doubts strangers were a norm there. When he arrived at the manor, he was greeted oddly by a young butler, proving the point. They have a polite back and forth, and he asks if his master is home, and John wants to see Siverly, and the butler looks at him, and all of a sudden he thinks John is a different Englishman and says he's expected and takes him to Siverly in the library. So John just plays along, of course, knowing he's not this other Englishman, right? They stop at the library door, and it's beautifully carved. The butler opens it, and Siverly is surprised to see John. Of course he would be, because he's not the other expected Englishman. Siverly is quite annoyed with his butler, and he tells him so. The butler stammers back, and Siverly sends him on his way. He tells John, rather Colonel Grey, it's a pleasant surprise to see him. He goes to introduce him to the other man in the room, but that man interrupts him, telling him he and John have already met. Why, it's Edward Twelvetrees, to whom he is already well acquainted. And John observes the room. He could see there were large sums written in a ledger before it was closed. He also notices a chest in the room, and it has many small bags in it. Siverly sees John notice the chest, but ignores it as to not call more attention to it or its contents. Twelvetrees wants to know what John is doing there, and John says he has to call upon Siverly. And you? Twelvetrees sneers at John, asking if he was in the neighborhood. John says no, he came specifically to speak to Siverly about a matter of great importance. But he can come back at a better time, something that's more convenient. And Siverly tells him to stay. And John tells him it's a private matter, and at first he goes to excuse Twelvetrees, Edward, actually, from the room while he and John talk. And John notes the use of his first name, as he calls it, his Christian name. Then he decides instead to take John out of the library to stroll and talk, leaving Twelvetrees behind, waiting for them. As he leaves, John bows to Twelvetrees, and Twelvetrees glares back. Well, so much for Jamie keeping John away from Twelvetrees and the money that Minnie had told him about. There was nothing he could have done about this. And as they walk, John compliments the property. He describes to us what he sees. Siverly accepts the compliment, but not to be fooled by such things. He asks why John's there. John jumps right in, talking about Carruthers. And eventually Siverly remembers him, and he'd heard Carruthers is dead. And John tells him he is. And he checks his pocket for the paper, pulling it out but not handing it to Siverly yet. And he asks if Siverly knows Hal. Well, he does, not personally, but he knows who he is. He says his brother came into papers from Carruthers, and they're concerning Siverly. Siverly gets immediately angry, like 0 to 100, and he grabs the paper from John. John now understands how the incidents in Carruthers' reports could have absolutely happened, seeing his hair trigger. The man had violence simmering just below the skin. He could also understand how the man had come close to killing Jamie. Siverly read the paper, crumpled it, and threw it to the ground. He was so angry he had a vein bulging in his temple. Siverly yells that it's balderdash, and John asks if he denies the truth to Carruthers' accounting. And really, Siverly denies Pardloe has any right to question him at all. And he wants John out of his sight after he calls him an interfering, busybodying fool. But before John could even move, Siverly turned and stomped off. He says like an ox. And John is standing there, a bit stunned, and he breathes out when he realizes he'd been holding his breath. Then he takes a moment to gather himself, and he thinks and mutters, "So much for gentle persuasion." He knows now he'll need an alternative plan, and what's to do about Twelvetrees and that chest full of money? He'd been in the military for a very long time, since he was 16 years old. He knew what a paymaster's chest and books looked like. Siverly and Twelvetrees were moving a large sum of money to several different people. Siverly had made his way back into the house after stomping and gesturing along the way, and John knows he's not likely going to get any more information out of him regarding the chest. Maybe he would go to where Twelvetrees was staying. He didn't think Twelvetrees would try to kill him, though he might want to bring his dagger just to be safe. And he says he will try to inveigle the information from him, which means to persuade someone to do something by means of deception or flattery. Twelvetrees strikes me as being a little smarter than that, though John could be very cunning and clever. Minnie was right. There was something up, and it's not good for John. He should steer clear of Twelvetrees and that money. But of course, John is in the thick of it now, because he's seen it, and you can't unring that bell. As John rises, Twelvetrees comes into view. He tells John to leave, to not come back. There's no profit in him pestering Siverly. He doesn't want to know what John is up to, and tells him not to meddle in matters he doesn't understand. He is very angry, and he's trying to get John to leave this be and to go and not revisit it. As Twelvetrees turns to leave, John asks just for a moment and hands him the copy of the Wild Hunt poem. Twelvetrees doesn't even read it. Just at the words that he sees, he turns pale. "Where did you get this?" John tells him he got it from Carruthers. And as he continues, Twelvetrees shoves the paper into his chest so hard he was pushed backwards, nearly off his feet. John is not having a good day of this. Twelvetrees was quickly moving away from him, and John sees that he steps on a snail, and it goes crunch. Twelvetrees takes no notice, leaving the stain glimmering on the ground. Do you think John might be feeling a bit like that snail, getting crushed underfoot at the moment, and he doesn't know why? Well, this turned out to be a truly short episode. There'll be another one up this week in a few days because of the timing. And we will be doing chapters 23 and 24. Please call in to the voice line at 719-425-9444 and leave me a message or questions or comments. You can email me the same types of things to adramavoutlander@gmail.com. How can you find A Dram of Outlander? Well, on Facebook, it's A Dram of Outlander page. There is a private A Dram of Outlander group that you have to ask to join, and that's for listeners only. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander. And the website, of course, is adramavoutlander.com. How can you support the podcast? Well, go to the social media places and follow or like. Talk to other listeners and other people who are commenting. You can join in on the Wednesday night Twitter chat. It's under hashtag ADOO, and we talk about the prior week's podcast content and sometimes about other Outlander-related things as well, or family life, whatever seems to come up. It's a good time, and seriously, my listeners are the smartest people ever. You guys continually blow my mind and expand my thinking when you catch things in a way that I don't see. I love it. I find it vastly fascinating. And I know I'm not alone in loving this material as much as I do. You know, we have to enable each other in this whole Outlander obsession thing that we have. The other way that you can support the podcast is please share the posts. Leave a review on iTunes. That will help me immensely. Tell other people about it. Have them listen as well. And finally, you can, of course, financially contribute to the upkeep and the welfare of the podcast. And it can be a one-time contribution. You just email me to ask about that. Or on patreon.com/adramavoutlander, you can do a monthly offering if you feel so led. I look forward to our next episode. And until next time, Slán je va.